This episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast is brought to you by Liberté Ministries. Freedom. The word alone elicits strong feelings of pride and comfort. That's because it's more than a word. Freedom is something that everyone longs to have in many areas of life. At Liberté Ministries, it's at the focal point of all they do. The word liberté means freedom, and so they strive to help those in Haiti find freedom in education, in economic self-sufficiency, and most importantly, freedom in Christ. Liberté works with 23 congregations of the Lord's people in Haiti and operates 2 schools that have a combined attendance of 600 students. They also have the Haiti School of Biblical Studies, a 4-year college that not only provides crucial training for preachers, but also for teachers and other church leaders. In addition, there is Harry's Home, a children's home that sees to the physical, emotional, and spiritual needs of many children. Go to TravisLovesHaiti.com for more information on how you can help spread the good news of Jesus in Haiti.
Welcome into the Helping Healing Humor podcast with Ben and Travis. I am Travis Creasy. That's Ben Hayes.
And that's Will Mahan right over there.
That's right. And we have some wonderful guests.
But before we do that, I cannot forget to say that this is brought to you by lads2leaders.com.
That's exactly right.
Lads, the number 2, leaders.com. But yes, you're right.
Welcome.
We do have some tremendous guests that we have been after to be on the podcast for almost a year now. And so they've finally thrown us a bone and come on the show. And that is who, Ben?
That is Dale and Jeff Jenkins, and I think everybody knows them. Will can probably introduce them better than I can. Everybody's going to recognize them from the Jenkins Institute, and they are everywhere. If you go somewhere, you will see one of them. If you have anything that has a board on it, then they've probably are serving on it in some way. I've realized that this week. Every time I talk to somebody, they're like, yeah, Dale's on our board or Jeff's on the board. So they're very well known, and we appreciate them and love them very much. And Will, I think, got to work for a little while with Jeff, right?
Unfortunately, didn't learn very much. Or we could say anytime I screw up ministry, Jeff is to blame for part of that.
It was a tough summer, I'll tell you that.
It was 2 summers. So.
See, he's already blocked out one of them.
Jeff doesn't even know.
Yeah, he's blocked out one of them.
He doesn't care about the youth
I didn't know you were there 2 summers.
I know.
Jeff's gone the whole summer, if I remember right.
Well, that's probably true. Yeah, we usually caught him twice for lunch at one of the Mexican joints in town.
Very nice.
So you guys do something that now, doing this full time, the Jenkins Institute. So tell us a little bit about what that is for somebody who's watching that doesn't know.
Well, make it as simple as we possibly can. And by the way,
It's good for us.
Helping healing humor, or y'all are
right.
trying to heal humor and help humor? Or
Yes.
Is that okay.
Whichever one comes first.
Whichever one. We just like it because it's the Triple H podcast, and so it makes us feel wrestling. No, anyway, go ahead.
To make it as simple as we can.
Yes, make it simple.
Our mission and goal is to help encourage and help grow ministers. The tagline we've used for years is serving God's servants.
It's awesome.
So we were meeting with some elders recently, and they said, so how many employees do y'all have? They wanted to know all about it. And I said, you're looking at, these are the employees. This is it. The Jenkins
Employee
Institute.
1, employee 2.
Right here. We're all that we have. So we wanted to honor our father, who was a great preacher in Alabama for 43 years, and he loved preachers. He instilled that kind of in us, and we love preachers, and we love you guys. Y'all are great. Thank you for inviting us a year ago and putting up with our times. But we want to help preachers as much as we can. That's what we want to spend the rest of our life doing.
So what are some of the things that you do to help preachers? What are some of the things that are on there?
So what's happened, we actually started the Jenkins Institute, which sounds really official, doesn't it?
It does.
Jenkins Institute.
Yes. We need to be institutionalized.
One of us at least. I had a blog and Jeff had a blog, and Dad had died, and we were talking one day when another guy was preaching. Jeff and I were talking to each other because
it was at the Freedheart of Electorship. I'll never forget, in Old Chapel Hall, and the guy was as boring as he could possibly be.
And Jeff leaned over to me and he said, I've got an idea. Now, when I say an idea, when I say I've got an idea, it means it's going to cost us something. Okay, Jeff said, I've got an idea. And I said, what? He said, let's combine our blogs. And my immediate response was, Jeff, you don't want to do that. You see, what most anyone who knows this knows is Jeff's the mature one of the two of us. I get us in trouble.
What he means by the mature one is I'm the older one. I'm the oldest one. He likes to
mature
bring that
in many
up
ways.
Often,
But yeah, and he said, no, we ought to do that. And so I said, well, let's talk about it. So that night when we got back to where we were staying, we started talking about it. We said, well, we need a name. And we decided to honor Dad. And it kind of sounds kind of official and everything too. So at the time it was just two blogs that ended up combined. And then we just started thinking about ways we could help preachers. And through the years, it's grown as a result of us thinking, what could we do to help preachers? We started this thing called the Better Conference that's designed to help preachers do the one thing that nobody's really helping preachers do, and that is actually stand in front of people and talk. You know, it's not exegesis, it's not sermon development and design. It's really designed to help them do what every preacher has to do every week. And then we in one of those Better Conferences, a guy said, we talked about that concept of quitting on a Monday, didn't we? Yeah.
Yeah, and the guy said, so is there anything in print about that? Y'all got anything? So we write these weekly articles on Monday to encourage preachers. And so then we started put the first one in book form on Monday, and then we did Don't Quit on Tuesday, and now we're up through Saturday, and next year will be Sunday, and we don't know what we're going to do after that. We're going to guess after that everybody's going to quit. But
2.0.
Yeah,
2.0.
there you go. I like that. Yeah. So we've done about 30 of the Better Conferences, and then we started writing some books, and we've published about 30 books, and we do the annual Bible study books that a lot of churches use, and a lot of preachers use them for preaching, and then we do the Sunday night prayers, and just everything we do is, our thought process is everything we do is geared toward preachers to try to help make their life a little bit more pleasant, a little more enjoyable, to make their work what they would like for it to be.
And the thing we do most is really uncharitable. It's easy to say, all right, we sent out a 300-word encourager for Monday. But what we do the most is Monday through Monday, 5 to 10 calls between the two of us almost every day from a minister somewhere in the world that's having a struggle or a challenge with his leadership or with some of the congregation, or wants to know, have y'all ever done this, or what can we do, how could we do that, and it's really just counseling throughout the week.
Yeah, I send people to you guys all the time because somebody goes, hey, do you know if there's a church that's looking, or do you know where this person could look, or this church could look for somebody? And I said, Jenkins Institute. Go to the Jenkins Institute. They know who's looking. They know all the people who are looking, all the churches who are looking. So we send people to you guys all the time.
So Dale started the Scoop blog, and we kind of incorporated that into what we're doing. And a lot of preachers use that to, some of them aren't really looking for a job. They just want to know, if there's something they might be interested in.
And some look at it to see if they're looking for a job.
Exactly, yeah.
They haven't heard yet.
The biggest thing right now we've started is this mentoring program, where we have about 150 preachers involved in the mentoring program. And the goal is to put young preachers through a 3-year kind of session, 1 year with one older preacher and the next year with a different one in the third year. Cool. And it'll build relationships for them and give them somebody they can talk to and somebody they can trust and somebody who will walk with them through difficult times.
Y'all have seen a bunch of ministers across what y'all have been doing. What are some of the struggles that you see ministers going through? And maybe how can some of those churches help?
One of the things I think is a lot of ministers struggle with either self-confidence or just pure paranoia. And, doubting themselves. Am I effective? Have I been effective? There are people being critical of me. Doesn't mean I need to throw up my hands and quit. This just a lot of doubt in a lot of ministers' minds on what they do. And as a result of that, the word today that's popular is anxiety. A lot of anxiety creeps in their lives.
Yeah, and so ministers struggle with a lot of things that everybody else struggles with, but some of the things are unique because of relationships. So included in that idea of anxiety and doubt has to do with relationships with elders and other people involved in their church life and sometimes in their own family. And so a lot of those struggles are the same kind of struggles that other people have. And Dale often says that nobody can really understand another minister like another minister can. And so if you were an electrician and you had problems, an electrician could be able to understand that. But if you're a minister, who's going to understand better than other ministers? And so we talk a lot about building relationships and this idea of these mentoring programs to try to encourage preachers, especially young ones, not to take those anxieties and those fears and those doubts all for themselves, but to be able to share those with other people.
I was going to say The Minister's Heart, I think, the little book that you had, I remember, of course, we share something. Dale and I both worked at Eva, and Eva was the first full-time preaching job that I had. And I don't know if that was your first preaching job, but we were both there a few years apart. But I can remember as
apart, actually.
as I read that book, I remember thinking, and I may have still been at Eva at the time, but I remember reading that and going, man, I know those struggles of waiting for somebody to show up at your office, and then years down the road wishing that people wouldn't show up at your office quite as much. And so those struggles, and I remember that thinking like, okay, I'm not the only one who thinks some of the thoughts that are in those things. So I think that's been helpful to me.
So Ben, that is what you said is huge. First of all, this concept of, am I really that weird? And I say that to Jeff a lot. Jeff, am I weird about this? And he usually says, yes, you are.
The answer is yes, most of the time, yes.
But I remember the tremendous mental release it was to me when I started publishing some of those things. And people started saying, man, I felt the same way all my life. I just didn't know how to say it, or didn't know where to take it. And I began to realize most ministers feel the same way. They face the same sorts of stressors and challenges in their life.
So spinning off of that, what can churches do to help their ministers?
I would say the first thing is exactly what you just said. Appreciate him and let him know. A lot of people, they appreciate what he does. They appreciate his work. And some people never tell you that. So if you're a part of a church and you want to build a relationship with your preacher, or you like your preacher and you want to keep him, you show him appreciation. You tell him you appreciate him. Let him hear that. Send him notes of encouragement. Tell him after a sermon or a Bible class he did well. We preachers are human, and we like to be appreciated just like everybody else does. So I'd say that's the first thing is, if you appreciate him, let him know you appreciate him.
Yeah. He needs to know that his work has mattered in your life. People walk out on Sunday and everybody tells the same lie, good sermon preacher, good sermon preacher.
Yes.
And we do appreciate that. But when you say, I've been struggling with that passage, or I've been struggling with that issue, or I've been struggling with that matter in my life, and it's suddenly very specific for them, it's okay. Well, I see that, and then your work matters in my life. Because whether we want to admit it or not, a lot of us, the feeling of, am I being effective? Mm-hmm. Am I impacting anybody? Am I making any difference? I stand up every week and I talk for 20 to 30 minutes on Sunday, maybe longer, and then on Sunday night I talk even longer than that. On Wednesday night I talk more, and I talk in a Bible class, and I talk on a radio show, and I talk. But do any of those words matter to anybody? Are they affecting anybody's life?
Yeah, and I would say, add to that, particularly if you're a church leader like an elder or just anybody who's interested, let him know that you have his back. I don't know of a worse feeling in the world that if something goes the way it shouldn't go, and the preacher feels like he's been hung out on a limb kind of by himself, and there may be people who agree with him or who are supportive of him, but they just let it go because they don't want to hurt somebody else's feelings. So if you're a church leader, particularly an elder, and you trust your preacher and you think he's doing a good job, let him know you've got his back. Let him know that he's not going to be hung out to dry by himself, that you'll be there for him, you'll support him, and take some of that stuff off of his shoulders and deal with it yourself, I would say.
I've been encouraging people to realize that the preacher and the youth minister are both in the flock as well. And they're learning, especially, I remember being a youth minister, and man, I look back at the things I did as a youth minister, I'm like, I needed help. I needed somebody to come along and guide me spiritually.
I had a youth minister call me one time, and he said his father-in-law was in the hospital in another state with some lung issues. His wife was pregnant and having some challenges with the pregnancy, and it was in the summer. If you're a youth minister, you know what that means. It was in the summer. And he said, I went to my elders. I've been there 7 years. I went to my elders. First time I ever went to them, and he said, I told them what was going on. And he said, suddenly they started trying to fix it. And he said, all I wanted them to do was treat me like they would treat any other member and pray for me and tell me they love me and tell me it's going to be all right, rather than trying to fix it or trying to work through some problem in the church. I just needed them to care for me. And I think every minister out there needs people that will just care for them and let them know. And Jeff said it, they've got their back. I would add to that, and Jeff, I want you to talk about this, that I need to let them know that it's okay when you go through difficult times.
Preachers do go through tough times. You have to deal with cancer, right? And it may not be the most opportune time in your life. You may have small children, and you may be busy about your work. And I lost my wife 3 years ago, and that was not the way I planned it. Didn't want that to happen. She dealt with cancer for 28 years off and on, and she didn't want to do that. We didn't want to lose her. She was still young, relatively speaking, not compared to you guys, but she was still young, and we weren't ready for that to happen. And we desperately I needed it, and my children needed it to have the church family behind us. And I honestly don't know. We say this a lot, but I don't know what people do that don't have a church family. And whether it's the leaders of the church or whether it's just members who care, people who care, that became kind of our survival rope. We could hang on to those people, and they held on to us. And there's no way I can describe how wonderful that was and how good that felt and how good it still feels. So when your preacher's going through a tough time, there's a beautiful statement in Revelation chapter 5 where the Bible says that he's weeping greatly. And the reason he's weeping is because they can't find anybody to open the book. And the text says in Revelation 5 that one of the elders came over to him. One of the elders in Revelation 4:4 talks about 24 elders on 24 thrones, and people try to figure out who those elders are, like 12 tribes of the Old Testament, or 12 sons of Jacob, or 12
y'all
prophets,
get ready to have your mind blown.
or 12 apostles, 12 apostles from the New Testament, New Testament writers. But nobody knows. It doesn't tell us that. But what it does say is they're elders. I've often thought, what if they're just elders? What if they are who it says they are? But one of those elders comes to him and he says, stop weeping. And basically what he's doing is he's getting up off the throne, and he's coming over, he's putting his hand around his shoulder, and he's saying everything's going to be okay. And that's the kind of shepherds we need in the church, who will, when a preacher or anybody else is suffering, they'll come over, put their arm around their shoulder and say, everything's going to be okay. We may not understand how right now, but everything's going to be okay.
On the Helping Healing Humor podcast, we talk about anxiety and stress and its impact on our everyday lives. We know that finances, including planning for retirement, is one of the leading causes of stress. It can be confusing and overwhelming. There are differing opinions on the best approach. It can be hard to know who to trust. For our retirement planning, Whitney and I trust Greg Howell of Howell Wealth Management at Northwestern Mutual. Greg is professional, knowledgeable, and accessible. He looks at the whole picture and thinks outside the box to create ways to help you reach your financial goals. Retirement planning can be especially challenging for ministers who do not have the benefit of a 401k, but Greg's expertise and creativity can get you on the right path and give you confidence for the future. Text him to schedule your free 15-minute consultation today at 931-638-1576. Be sure to tell him Ben and Travis sent you. Remember, that's Greg Howell of Howell Wealth Management at Northwestern Mutual, 931-638-1576. I can remember being intimidated. Gary Gooch was our preacher at Jacksonburg, and being intimidated for no reason, not how he presented himself. But he was just a guy that got up and spoke, and I was so intimidated, and it was such a blessing to me as a young kid and as a young Christian when I went to his house and spent time with him and realized, he's just a human being. And so even going to conferences like we are, Ministry League experience, this hanging out with people that, you might see up on stage and go, wow, but they're struggling with things and going through it. And it's always important to remember that at the bottom line, they're Christians. And we're Christians, and we're all trying to get to the same spot.
One of Jeff's favorite quotes from one of his real heroes is, "There's a hurting in every pew."
The guy says there's hurting on every pew. Yeah. And then, another good friend often says that everybody has a story. And some people just want to tell their story and be heard. And that's what good Christians will do, is listen to the story. And I would encourage church members to listen to your preacher's story, your youth minister's story. He's got things in his life that he needs to share too. And so if you'll be a listening ear, that'll go a long way in building strong relationships that will be last a lifetime and be healthy and help the church as well.
So I don't think we covered the website, the actual address. So you want to give us that real quick, and then we'll have a good old fun question to wrap things up.
TheJenkinsInstitute.com. It's really complicated.
I love it.
TheJenkinsInstitute.com. It's got all of our resources, all of our upcoming seminars, all of the books that we sell, all of the articles that we write. The daily Bible study guide that we do every year is
great.
Designed for church members in the pew to study with your families at home, to study in small groups and Bible classes.
Your thoughts from the mound.
We've got thoughts from the mound and more thoughts from the mound, a couple of books we've done. And so, and even the books on Don't Quit on a Monday, a lot of those articles, people could read them and think about their own personal struggles.
I think elders and churches, congregations can help ministers by letting them know it's okay sometimes when they make a mistake, when they fail, because we're human and we're going to make mistakes. I'm not giving us license to do that. I don't have to give us license to do that. We're going to do it.
Yes.
And if I'm one of those boards that I serve on over 20 years ago. One of the chief executive officers of the organization made a mistake. And for about 4 or 5 years, every year, somebody on that board would remind this individual of the mistake they made. And one day he just blew up in the meeting. He said, "Listen, that's 5 years ago. I learned from it. I'm past that. Will you please let me move on?" And I think that maybe a lot of ministers need to know they can move on. We have a challenging dynamic sometimes that we set up where we have to be perfect, but everybody knows we're imperfect. And so if next Sunday, and I'm not advocating that we do this, I don't know how to do it really, but if next Sunday you preach, Ben, and somebody came forward and said, "I'm struggling with alcoholism," and you prayed for them, and somebody that was loved in that church, as soon as that service was over, you know what would happen? Everybody in that church would come up and rally around that guy and hug him and tell him, "We're praying for him." If you got up next Sunday and said, "I'm struggling with alcoholism," what would happen? It's a challenge.
You're having that family that rallies around you in that church. And I hear a lot of ministers tell those horror stories. And I've been blessed with the places that I've been to have people who have rallied around. Again, I don't know how everybody would respond in those situations, but it is. And when you find that, it's hard to let go of that, because that's a good place.
And I would add along that line that I think the vast majority of people are really good people, and they really do help. They do want their preachers to do well, and they help preachers. And sometimes, we tend to get focused on the small minority of people that don't like us or don't like something we say, and we forget about all the people that do. So sometimes it's good just to be around people that love you and care about you.
And the mistakes that church leaders make a lot of times, they're not dishonest, ugly, mean mistakes. Yeah. They're just human mistakes. It's how they thought they should respond. It may not be the best way.
It goes back to what Travis said about that earlier, just that you're a part of the flock. And I think that's the key too, is allow them to do things and be a part of the families and the congregation. That's been a great asset at Highland Park with us and our families. We felt like we're a part of the family. And I think sometimes that's hard for people who are moving into an area to feel, and it takes some time. So
I know this preacher certainly lies awake at night after delivering lessons and going, "Man, I wished I wouldn't have said that. Man, that was really dumb. Man, I wish." And so I think people miss out on that we know we make mistakes because we talk a lot, and that's inevitable. Bible tells us, right? But to have somebody come and say, "Man, I really never thought about it that way," or whatever that may be, is encouraging in its own, even if you don't even agree. But I've never seen it from that perspective. It can be good.
We're paid to talk.
Yes. Yeah,
my wife often reminds me, though, we're not paid by the word.
If you could sit down and have a meal with someone from the Bible, or someone's, if you've got 2 or 3, that'll work, other than Jesus, right? I think we all would agree Jesus would be first. Who would that be? Who would you invite to dinner to sit down and have a conversation?
I would want to sit down with Barnabas. I don't want to know what it felt like when he wrote the book of Hebrews.
Oh, hot take. We don't get a lot of those. We do not get a lot of those on the podcast, but I love it. Thank you, Dale.
I don't know that, but I would like to sit down with a guy. And, the guy that when the church started passing out names, the name they gave him was Encourager. Man, I mean, how much better could it get than that? Peter the Rock. I mean, great. The Rock. But I don't want to sit down with Barnabas and talk to him and know more about him. We know a lot about John and Peter and Paul, but I'd like to know more about him. I'd like to talk to him.
I would probably choose to sit down with John, because John, I do believe he was the closest friend that Jesus had, and he knew Jesus perhaps better than anybody. He said on one occasion that we could have written more, and if we would have written everything, all the books in the world. So obviously he knew a lot about Jesus that he didn't tell us, and I would love to sit down and have that conversation, say, tell us more. What was Jesus like? How did he think? What motivated him to do the things that he did? And I think John could give us a lot. He's already given us a lot of insight, but I think he could give us more.
He says, we beheld his glory. Yeah. And, sometimes we get those very personal verses. He really did.
Mm-hmm. We want to encourage you, especially if you're a preacher, to check out the JenkinsInstitute.com. Gentlemen, it is always a pleasure to hang out with y'all. Thank you for coming on the show.
Great, our pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Love y'all guys, and thank y'all for all y'all do to help others.
Thanks for being with us for this episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast. Be sure to download our free ebook, 28 Days of Focused Living, at benandtravis.com and receive all of our Helping Healing and Humor extra content directly in your inbox. We look forward to having you join us at the same Ben and Travis time, same Ben and Travis channel.